Hey, good afternoon. This is Frank Simon with the rest of the news. We have two special guests today. First, we have Matt Singleton.
Hey, how's it going, Dr. Simon? How's it going, everybody? My name is Matt Singleton. I'm a minister, and I'm also I guess we'll go with a blogger. You can check out my internet ministry on biblesmack.net.
Okay, and I believe we have Mark Looy on the line. Is that right, Mark?
Frank, good afternoon. I'm here. Good to be with you.
Well, that's great. Now, Mark is with Answers in Genesis. Mark, can you tell us a little bit what you do up there at Answers in Genesis?
Yeah, we're right up here in northern Kentucky, just about 90 minutes from most of your Louisville listeners. And our ministry is an apologetics one. And the word apologetics shouldn't scare anyone. It's simply a Greek word that means giving a defense or an answer for our Christian faith. And I happen to know that the ministry there of your radio station is called The Answer. And so we provide answers to defend the historicity of all of the Bible, but the book of Genesis most of all, because that's where the Bible is most under attack and scrutinized. And we're the ones behind the Creation Museum here in northern Kentucky and the new Ark Encounter. So we equip Christians to have answers to defend their faith, but also, as with our attractions, we're very evangelistic. We don't hide the fact that we want to share the gospel with the people who tour our attractions.
Let me go ahead and say, Mark, I really appreciate your ministry. I've been up to the Creation Museum at least 3, maybe 4 times, and my parents did a little thing going on with foreign exchange students, and we had one member of the group who came up to the Creation Museum from the Netherlands, and she came to the Lord with a lot of the material thanks to the Creation Museum, and really appreciate it. I got to meet you a couple of years ago. I was doing some political activism against Common Core, and you gave me some good advice, so appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Always encouraging to find out that people become Christians after touring the Creation Museum or the Ark Encounter, because after all, we just don't want to convince people that evolution is wrong, which I used to accept, by the way, Frank. I used to be an evolutionist. But we don't want to just win that battle of creation versus evolution. Ultimately, in terms of eternity, that doesn't mean much at all. We want people to leave our museum, to leave the Ark Encounter as Christians. That's our ultimate purpose with our attractions.
We've been working for the last 3 years to try to pass a bill called Senate Bill 17 through the Kentucky legislature that would legalize prayer, religion back in the public schools. That passed about 2 months ago, and Governor Bevin signed it, and it's now law. And we called Answers in Genesis and got 3 books. Well, at least 3. We got 3 courses. This is the one called Demolishing Strongholds, which I believe is about creation science. And then we got this other one, Answers Academy, Biblical Apologetics. Other courses, too, that we're trying to find people here in Kentucky that will give them a copy of this book, and they'll take it. We want them to take it to their principal and try to get a time slot, usually before school, where they can have like a Bible study in the public schools before schools start. So we really appreciate what Answers in Genesis did about helping us get this material. And if somebody wants to call in and know someone, a principal or a teacher or a student, they can call 893-2444 and leave a message. We'll get back with them.
Most of your listeners are not too far from our museum and also our full-size Noah's Ark. But our website is just a wealth of free information. If people are struggling over whether or not the Bible is true in Genesis, whether it's the so-called ape men or carbon dating or dinosaurs, if you go to our website, which is now one of the most visited religious websites in the world, Frank, if people go to answersingenesis.org, they have all sorts of equipping information right at their fingertips.
That is great. You know, I was up at the Ark Encounter a couple of weeks ago, and it was very impressive. But in my mind, the best part was the presentation by Ray Comfort on the third floor of the Ark, where it was like a soul-winning presentation of the gospel. And that was really impressive.
What's impressive, first of all, as people arrive at the Ark, is they see this massive 510-foot long ship. It is, even the most jaundiced atheist admits that it's an impressive structure. In fact, some people, Frank, I'm not saying it, but some people have told me, including on opening day almost a year ago, that this is the eighth wonder of the modern world. And then when you get inside, the ship is just impressive on another level. Wood beams going everywhere, and then we fill the Ark with exhibits that answer the most asked questions people have about Noah's flood and Noah's Ark. You know, where did the water come from to cover the earth? How did all the animals arrive for Noah, and how did he take care of them? How many animals were there on the Ark? As we answer all of those questions, by the time people get to the third deck, they realize that, you know what, maybe there is something to this account of Noah's flood and Noah's Ark.
Wow.
So as we answer their questions, then we show them that Ray Comfort film, that well-known evangelist. We want folks to consider the claims of Christ after watching that film.
It was tremendous. I got a copy of the video, As in the Days of Noah. It is one of the best videos I've ever seen. It's really good. Have you seen it, Matt?
That one I'm not sure of.
It's Ray Comfort, and it's really good. We think that one of the main reasons we have so many problems in America today is because we've kicked God out of our public schools. And that's given rise, in my opinion, to, drugs and crime and poor academic achievement and a lot of other things, partly at least because we've kicked God out of our thinking, out of our children's lives.
I've even had a conversation with a good friend of ours, Rick Howland, about, when people start to assume that, maybe God is not in control, or maybe I'm just a bunch of chemicals. Instead of, running to God and running to the scriptures, a lot of people are running to substance abuse.
Oh, my goodness.
And here in Louisville, it is really hitting home.
Yeah.
Some people nicknamed us Little Chicago. I mean, we've had, it was close to 150 murders last year, not to mention this year, and that's not even including all there's masses of people having ODing and dying of heroin and things of that nature. What do you think? Do you think there's a connection between having an understanding of God and the Bible versus not when it comes to some of this crime?
Well, let's let Mark answer that. What do you think, Mark?
The film we show on the Ark is entitled As in the Days of Noah.
Yeah.
Meaning there was a very, very wicked time. People were rebellious. They didn't want to adhere to God's standards. And that's what we're experiencing today. And Frank, you and I are old enough to remember the 60s and 70s when there was still some vestige of Christianity in the culture. Yeah. But slowly but surely we have, many decades ago we had prayer removed from schools, and now if teachers even bring up God or creation or much less intelligent design, they're going to face discipline or perhaps even a lawsuit from these so-called civil liberties groups. And as evolution is taught more and more as fact, unfortunately, in our public schools, coming alongside of that means that we're just animals in a struggle for survival over millions of years, and there's no meaning, there's no purpose in life, no absolute standards. And then we can do whatever we want with our bodies. And why should we be surprised that we have a drug epidemic today, as people think that they're just here as the product of a meaningless evolutionary process? And so many of the social ills today, in fact, so-called gay marriage, we can address those right at the book of Genesis.
Right. Okay. Mark, we'll be right back. We got to stop for a commercial break. Hi, I'm Dr. Frank Simon. I'm an allergist and family doctor, board certified in both allergy and internal medicine. I specialize in allergy, headaches, sinus, hives, cough, asthma, hypertension, and diabetes. We're located at 1404 Browns Lane near Norton Suburban Hospital. Our phone number is 895-5088. We can see you tomorrow. Matt, you had a question you wanted to ask Mark.
one thing I've seen, that there has been a very strong evolutionary and sometimes atheistic vent that really is mad at anything that y'all produce, especially the recent Ark Encounter. And I've heard people make that claim that, like, you'll be a burden on the community and you're taking up too much funding, even though all it was a tax cut, not an actual giving of money. But how is the community? I think is it Williamsburg? Is that right?
It's Williamstown, and that's in Grant County. And Grant County is south of Cincinnati by about 40 miles or so.
So how is the economy there doing?
Yeah, first, the economy in northern Kentucky is doing very, very strong because of the presence of the Ark. Hotel owners, restaurant owners, if you're in a tourism-related business in northern Kentucky, you're doing very, very well. Sometimes it's very difficult to find a hotel room in northern Kentucky because there are so many tourists coming from outside the area. In fact, last Saturday, we had over 6,500 people come to the Ark, and the overwhelming majority of them came from outside of Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio. And regarding that tax incentive you just mentioned, first let me make it clear that no money has come out of the state treasury to build the Ark. It's all privately funded. Now, what will happen as a reward for building in Kentucky as opposed to, let's say, Indiana or Ohio, Kentucky has a tourism incentive that at the end of the year, the sales tax that you have collected at the Ark or any attraction that qualifies, and we did, will get a rebate of that sales tax. But meanwhile, jobs have been created, sales tax has been generated by hotels and restaurants throughout the area. The bottom line is it's a net gain for the state to have the Ark here as opposed to another place. I tell you, if you own a hotel in northern Kentucky or a restaurant, you're doing extremely well because guests are pouring in from all over the world to see this huge life-size Noah's Ark.
Department of Commerce or somebody gave Answers in Genesis a big reward of some kind because they had stimulated the economy so much in that area. Isn't that right?
Yeah, we haven't received the rebate of the sales tax we've collected. That comes later.
Okay.
But everything you see out there at the Ark, no state funds were involved to construct the ship. The benefit to the Treasury will be enormous with this tourist attraction that will help with some of the services that the state provides its citizens. I mean, it's such a big win for the state to have a wholesome, family-friendly economic driver right here in northern Kentucky.
That's a state law that any business that brings jobs and money into the area is always given a tax break because, like you say, it's a net gain for everybody. And it's not just the Ark, but any business. So it's just a routine procedure, isn't that right?
Yes, it's a part of the Tourism Development Act that the state passed, and we're using it as other tourist attractions are. And the bottom line is Kentuckians are going to pay fewer state income tax because we're bringing money into the Treasury, and their tax burden is being lessened.
You deal with the Creation Museum, and of course now we're talking about the Ark Encounter. The two things that kind of pop up in my mind are, has the Creation Museum, is it doing okay, or is it suffering with the competition of the Ark? And
no. Okay. No. Oh, you had a second question?
Yeah, also just like if people are out there and, they're thinking about it and they're like, well, which one do I do, the Ark or the Creation Museum? What would you say to them? Well,
first of all, with the Creation Museum, we've just finished our best year ever. We've been open for 10 years. And we're not ones to really release attendance figures, although we did release years ago that our very first year we had over 400,000 people for the Creation Museum, and this year we've shattered that. I'll just say that. And the crowds are so large at the Creation Museum that we've had to expand. We're putting in a parking lot right now that will eventually have spots for about 1,300 cars, and we're building an annex next to the museum to help relieve some of the crowds we experience on a Saturday. The museum's best years are being experienced right now, and at the Ark, as I said earlier, we've had we've had as many as 8,000 people a day at the Ark.
Oh,
and the Ark can actually handle more than 8,000 at one time, especially since we have a zoo behind the Ark to help, with the crowds. But the cap, the reason we won't get more than 8,000 people a day is the lack of hotel rooms in the region. It's as simple as that. I had one person told me they had to stay outside of Indianapolis, which is 2 hours away, over 2 hours away from the Ark. And so if we have more hotel rooms, more hotels being built in northern Kentucky, we could see crowds of 10,000 or more. And so that's just a reflection of how well the Ark is doing. And plus, we won the Star of Tourism Award presented by a local agency here. They gave that award because we're such an economic driver for tourist-related businesses here in northern Kentucky as well as central Kentucky.
Mark, I got some of your background material. It says you at one time worked with Dr. Morris on the Creation Research Institute.
Yeah, a great man of God and a great scientist. He passed away, oh my goodness, probably 10 or so years ago now. But before Ken Ham and I started Answers in Genesis 23 years ago, we both had the privilege of working with this great man, Dr. Henry Morris, founder and president of the Institute for Creation Research. And as often as I can say it, I say that we stand on the shoulders of great men like Henry Morris and Dr. Duane Gish and others who did their pioneering research to support the creation account of origins and also to refute evolution.
Is Dr. Gish still alive?
Dr. Gish passed away 4 or 5 years ago. He was my spiritual father.
Really?
He was the man who did all those famous creation evolution debates. And I was privileged. His family asked me to speak at his funeral. And so I flew out to San Diego a few years ago to do that. And Henry Morris and Duane Gish were two of the giants of this past century in terms of upholding biblical authority in increasingly secular times. Just wonderful people. Did you get to know any of them, Frank?
Yes, we had Gish come to Louisville and debate somebody. He didn't charge us anything, but the evolutionist charges an arm and a leg. We couldn't get him to come. We called Harvard and Yale, and we called all over the United States trying to find somebody that would take the side of evolution, and they were all scared. They didn't want to be in a face-to-face debate.
One of my favorite creation science textbooks, and I think it's sturdy still today, is The Biblical Basis for Modern Science, and that was written by Henry Morris.
Man.
He is one of my... He was a great, not only a great scientist, but he was also a great theologian and thinker, too.
Yeah, I tell you, he knew as a scientist, he knew his Bible as well as any pastor you'd ever meet. He was just a wonderful, godly, humble man, too. It was an honor to get to know him.
Yeah, I remember one thing he said, some people believe that it went from fish to gish. Yeah, I remember we had to really beat the bushes to find somebody that would debate him. We finally got some guy out of University of Indiana. Mark, we really appreciate you telling us about the Creation Museum. I took my grandchildren up there, and they were tickled pink about it, and I was really impressed. We wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us anything else. I see your website is Answers in Genesis, oneword.org. And we were on there this morning, and it's a tremendous website. Was there anything else that you wanted to tell us?
Find out more about our Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter. They're about 45 minutes away from each other. We needed a lot of land for the Ark and a 4,000-spot parking lot. And just go to that website and find out, where they are exactly, what days might be best to visit. I strongly encourage folks to visit on a Sunday afternoon after church, because that's when the crowds are not as big, and then be back to Louisville that evening. Also, something about that website, too, of answersingenesis.org. If your listeners hear something in the news or watch TV and there's a new so-called ape man or something that challenges the authority of the Bible, our website, usually within hours, has some kind of a response to what's happening in the news. Please use that website. It's free. Of course, there's admission to the Creation Museum, and the Ark Encounter because it's a big expense to keep those attractions open. In fact, they are, as you know, Frank, since you've walked through, they're very high tech.
Yeah.
In fact, our guests, even the evolutionists who come and visit the Ark and the museum, they will say, many of them will say, that it's the best looking and most high tech museum they've ever seen.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that we were of the quality of some of the great Smithsonian museums, and we wanted the Ark to be an attraction on par with places like Disney and Universal Studios, and many of our guests say it's even a better experience
Absolutely.
than those theme parks in
Absolutely.
Orlando.
Yeah, and the other thing, I was worried I wouldn't be able to find it, but really it's got good signs so that if you get into the right area, the signs will direct you to either the Ark or the Creation Museum.
The Ark Encounter is right off of Interstate 75, which is one of the busiest interstates in the whole country. It runs from northern Michigan all the way down to Miami, and we have that 800 acres right at that interchange. So you get off the exit, you're just a quarter of a mile from the parking lot. So it's as convenient as you can imagine. Plus, we chose northern Kentucky as the place for our attractions because almost two-thirds of Americans, Frank, can drive to northern Kentucky and Cincinnati in one day. Atlanta is less than a 7-hour drive. Chicago, just over 5. You could drive from Cincinnati to New York City in one day. It's a long drive, but I've done it a few times. And so we wanted to make the Creation Museum and Ark Encounter central to the population centers so that people could drive here in a day or fly in. Most Americans could fly to the Cincinnati airport, which is in Kentucky. Most of those flights are under 2 hours.
I was real impressed with both of those tourist attractions, whatever you want to call them, but they had a very good, deep meeting. And the other thing we appreciate is Answers in Genesis helping us with these courses. And maybe I'll say once more that we are looking for teachers, principals, and children that are interested in helping us get these courses from Answers in Genesis into the public schools now that Senate Bill 17 has been passed.
And also, Frank, it's a shame that some of these courses have to be held outside of school hours.
Yeah.
But let me say this. We're not an organization that's trying to force creation or intelligent design into the classrooms. We don't think that would be wise to force it because the teachers will teach it poorly. But at the very least, the instructors in our public schools have the academic freedom to at least point out the problems with Darwinian evolution. They don't even have to mention intelligent design or the creator God of the Bible. Just teach the pros and cons. Teach it warts and all. And all teachers should have that academic freedom. But of course, we have these civil liberties groups, so-called, that are trying to squelch any teacher from questioning evolution, because after all, evolution is the scientific and philosophical foundation for atheism and humanism, and they don't want their worldview to be undermined by teaching anything that would question Darwinian evolution.
Matt and I were talking the other day, and it occurred to me that modern science has almost done away with a lot of the arguments for evolution. Is that true?
Yeah, we have several scientists on our staff with PhD degrees from places like Harvard and others, and they're convinced that the book of Genesis is relevant and scientifically trustworthy in our modern age.
Okay, Mark, God bless you. Thanks for coming in from Answers for Genesis. Matt, I was just reading this book called Big Agenda by David Horowitz, and it's some tremendous stuff in there. But one of the points that he made is when they did a study of the top universities in America, they found that all of the professors were left-wing Democrats, and they had very few, if any, Republicans that were professors. When you pay these $15,000, $20,000 a year to send your child to college, really, you're not sending them to college, you're sending them to propaganda mill.
John Dewey, the founder of the public school system, was also one of the co-signers of what was called the Humanist Manifesto. And so the religion of secular humanism is embedded in a lot of our state public education schools. I mean, instead of taking your kid to a church, you take them to a mosque. You'd probably be better off taking them to a mosque than you would some of these universities.
Well, what do you got to tell us there?
Well, I tell you what, we talked about the creation and evolution debate. As much as it bothers me as far as our population when it comes to atheism, the thing that scares me more in our country right now is Satanism.
Yeah.
This idea that there is no devil. Even some more liberal Christians who just want to think of God as a God of love have introduced this idea of there can't be a devil.
Right.
Well, you're making God look bad because everything the devil does is then associated with God instead. As far as the intellectual part of it, there has been some arguments from usually borrowing from a liberal form of Judaism. They kind of argue, Satan isn't part of the Old Testament, which is false, and I'll show that in just a second. When they read their Old Testament, they don't read it like us. They don't, I think of the Old Testament as a closed system. And what I mean is that there's this much inspired, which is all that's written in there, and there's no more books. Everything is
right.
what it is.
Right.
But basically, they think they can, that maybe some of their other writings are inspired as well, and yet not as inspired. In other words, that the Bible has errors in it and things like that.
Yeah.
But the oldest published book in the Bible is the book of Job.
Right.
And basically, you look at Job 1:7, and the Lord said unto Satan.
Yeah. There it is.
So,
there it is.
It's definitely there. The Old Testament does talk about it. Also, here's an important verse to think about. It's Deuteronomy 32, I believe it's verse 17. They sacrifice unto devils, not unto God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up. So what that means is that when we talk about an idol or worshiping a false god, in reality, there is a demon behind that.
Yeah.
So now, sometimes there are passages like Isaiah chapter 14 that talk about Lucifer. It'll be something where, if you isolate it, it's just talking about the king, but then when you look at what he's saying, the devil's behind that, and they're talking about Lucifer, the devil. In the New Testament, it clears all this stuff up. The devil comes as an angel of light. Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." He wasn't saying that Peter was literally Satan, but that Satan was behind his ideas and stuff.
Yeah.
And so when we start to understand the Bible as a whole, all this stuff gets straightened out. And you have to understand, and let me think about this, okay? When you talk to somebody who's a satanic priest or a warlock, they'll tell you, okay? They're like, they'll say this, I don't really believe in Satan. I believe in myself.
Uh-huh.
But that is what satanic worship is.
Yeah.
Satan said, you shall be as gods.
Yeah.
Okay. His favorite name in Isaiah 14 is I shall ascend to the heavens. I shall be like the Most High.
Yeah.
I.
There's a lot going on. We're in sort of a cultural war. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Battle belongs to the Lord.
We're about out of time again. Thanks for listening, and tune in again next week for the rest of the news.